This is Glenn Yancey with InSource Solutions. In this video, we're going to go over a new app inside of the InTouch OMI called Content Presenter. The purpose of Content Presenter is to show you KPIs that can be navigable inside of your application. In my scenario, I have a bunch of instances inside of my IDE for my Galaxy that are exposing the blending stations that exist in my fictitious app, where I have two separations in my mixing area, one for a kosher side and the other for a non-kosher side. So what I would like to do is to create a graphic that can be that KPI that I had mentioned earlier and make that available on my screen so that I can view from a very high level to see, are there any alarms in each one of these mixers? This gives me that visibility of, is the alarm that's occurring a severe alarm? Is it back into a normal state? Or is there anything else I need to worry about? This is a content presenter on the left. I've created for each instance on the template level a single graphic with a picture of the fruit that the blending station is representing, the fruit itself, the amount of gallons in the tank, and the engineering units. Now, what's also appearing with this are borders that are appearing around the instance name, which is the fruit. That border is giving me an indication of, am I an alarm? Am I back into a normal state? Are there any alarms that need to be acknowledged? If so, then I'll go ahead and do that. Or are there any severe or high-level alarms? So what we're going to discuss is the process of me going through and creating the graphic, then using the Content Presenter app inside of InTouch OMI to lay them out. Now, this doesn't have to be just a blending station or a mixing station like I was mentioning. This can be used for maybe pump stations or lift stations. What this is doing is it's doing an export of all of the instances that meet a specific criteria. And that criteria is defined in the graphic level. Let's take a look at that graphic first. Okay, first it's important for us to look inside of our IDE to understand how the derivation view works. The reason why I'm pointing this out is it's best for us to understand the relationship between templates, any derived templates that fall underneath that, and then the instances. The reason being is when I make a change to a graphic or add a graphic onto the template level at its highest point, in this case a master template called Juice Mixer, that graphic will then in turn propagate itself down to each instance that was derived from it, whether or not it was through a derived instance that came from Juice Mixer or from Juice Mixer itself. So I did just that by creating a graphic, which I called S1. In that graphic, which I will go ahead and select just to show you the process. The assumption is that you guys are familiar with how to create an orchestra graphic inside of a template. So what I did earlier was to hit the plus sign to create a graphic, which I just left at the name of S1. When I select that and double click, I open up the orchestra graphic editor for this graphic. Keep note that in 2020, the name of orchestra graphic goes away and it becomes industrial graphics. So here I created a rectangle, added some text in there, and then created a little component in there to show the fruit that the instance is representing. The more important piece is that for this graphic as a whole, I gave it a content type. In this case, I just called it App Device Title. This is important because the content presenter that we're going to use is going to browse all of the instances that we have, and any instance that has a graphic of this type will then in turn get populated into that presenter application. There are a lot of different categories that you can choose from. In fact, I could choose a user-defined as long as the content presenter is designated to look for any graphic of that content type. It will then pull that in to the content presenter pane. So just a quick preview. I have text here to represent the value, here to the engineering units, and this will end up representing the name of the instance, which I did by selecting value display and name and choosing tag name. I also added a border in here for the animations so that if that mixer for any one of its tags or attributes goes into an alarm state, I'd like to at least know that, as well as the severity level. The cool thing about this is it's pretty much programmed for me to use. I just type in me so that the attributes that are listed here know to point to the instance when it gets deployed. Since this graphic will be used over and over again, the me ends up becoming a pronoun, which we call relative references. That tells me the name of the instance. So I'm going to close out of this. So with OMI, when you create an application for OMI, you have to create two things. A screen profile that says what is the dimensions and how many monitors am I going to use. The second piece is called a screen layout. So I'm going to show you an example of a screen layout that I have that is going to represent the content presenter as well as the graphic screens. Now, what I didn't show you, by the way, was the main detailed graphic that I have here for this fictitious juice mixer. This has a content type of detailed, so that any instance I select in my content presenter will in turn navigate directly to that. Remember, OMI is all about becoming content aware, navigating the application and it following you wherever you go in that application. So now I'm going to open up the screen profile that I created, which I call Juice Content Presenter. The purpose of the screen profile is to define panes, like a window pane, and what will get shown in that window pane when you navigate to a certain instance. In this case, pane 3 is designated to be a detailed pane. Remember that graphic that we showed a little earlier, this one right here? Well, that is going to be the one that gets populated inside of this pane. Down below, I've created an alarm pane, which is using the alarm app alarm control. I added that to this bottom pane that I've created and used the query inside of it so that it points to my alarm provider, which in this case is on my local machine, but is using Galaxy and the area, which is called mixing, separated by the little exclamation mark that you see there. At the top, I have a quick toolbar app that I'm using to populate that top pane. And then for the pane 1, which I've created earlier, is going to contain the Content Presenter application. I selected the Content Presenter app by going to Toolbox. Once this pane was selected, dragged and dropped this app into that pane, and then I went through the configuration of that pane. So let's go through a few of the properties, because this is where selecting the right property is important. What I do know is that the graphic that I've created, this one where my mouse is showing, has dimensions of 400 width by 100 pixels tall. However, the pane here, I would like to show 2 columns. At this point, let's just ignore the display rows and display columns. In reality, I've had more trouble with defining something there, so I'm leaving that blank. What I am going to put is to say I'd like to have 2 rows. This pane itself is a little bit more than 400 pixels wide. So let me go ahead and do that by dividing the amount of pixels in half widthwise, which is 200. So I can have 2 graphics showing side by side. Height-wise, I want it to be 50 pixels. So I'm choosing a size mode of fixed. Then towards the top, I want my fill to be horizontal. It's just how it lays things out. It's not so much truly horizontal or vertical, it's just the manner in which it lays out the graphics. That's not so important, but by choosing horizontal, I know that each graphic gets populated vertically, as weird as that sounds. Next is grid content. The view mode, which I've chosen grid content for, is going to show this graphic as a grid, rather than single graphics that I can scroll to the left or scroll up or down. What I want is to show this in almost like a tabular format. Towards the top of this, there's a few things that are important. You remember that content type that we saw earlier that says app device title? Well, I need to make sure that this content presenter is using that content type. If not, I'm going to be in a world of hurt, because it's going to pull any graphic in any instance that gets selected. In my scenario, this little S1 graphic that shows the fruit, that's the only graphic in my application that is of this app device title. So I know it's not going to search any other instance except for the ones that belong to my juice mixer. So I'm making sure that that matches the graphic type that is in this S1. I'm also going to make sure that it is sorted by alphabetical order. So that is chosen here. I'm not going to worry about the other ones here, but alphabetical order for me is important. I'll scroll down a little bit more to show you a few other properties that need to be addressed. For display, I want this to be interactive. So I'm hitting the checkbox here. And also, when I do interact with it, want to trigger the navigation so that it says that graphic that gets selected, who's its instance. And I'm going to adjust everything else in this application based on the instance that I have selected. So I have chosen to check those two properties. And I've given a background of a blackish color. This will end up populating, much like what we see here. When the application opens up for the first time, it goes through alphabetically and dumps each one of the instances graphics of the app device title. Then I can select any one of these. I'm going to choose date. Date, as you can see, has a border blinking on it to let me know that there was a severe alarm, which has now been downgraded to a high level alarm. By selecting that, it navigated this screen to the detailed graphic of that instance called date. It's also showing the alarms down below for the area that date belongs to, which in our scenario is in our model view. We can see that it belongs to the non-kosher mixing area, as we see here. So it returns back non-kosher as the name of the area or alarm group, and then the query inside of OMI populates with any tags that are of that same area. Now I could go a step further and tell this alarm display to go directly to show alarms for the instance selected and nothing more than that. But for our scenario, I just left it to be area centric. Now, if I were to add a new graphic to this, let's just say I'm going to add a new instance called Mango. Mango doesn't have an instance created for it. So the nice thing with OMI is I can add this on the fly. So in the IDE, I'm going to my derivation view. I'm going to go up to, let's just say tropical. And I'm going to create a new instance. Tropical is a derived template from the juice mixer. And I've got a few tropical fruits already in there. So this one's going to be called Mango. I'll say yes. Gets created. Okay. So in my model view, I went up to unassigned area, dragged and dropped Mango to the physical location in my mixing area called kosher. For Mango, I'm now going to deploy it. So after deploying the Mango instance, then inside of our InTouch OMI, Mango's graphic now shows up into the content presenter, having updated itself. And I can already see that I have an alarm, which is fantastic, even though I don't really want an alarm. So at least I can address that for that specific instance. Anyways, that is how the content presenter works, and just a little bit of insight on how to add the content presenter inside of InTouch OMI, as well as how it can be utilized. Whether or not you have a pump station, lift station, or whatever instance that this is representing in your type of vertical, then Content Presenter can show you these key performance indicators or KPIs in this grid format so that it's easier for you to navigate throughout your application. So thank you for your time for watching this video.